I'm going to be recording a psilocybin experience story. Psilocybin, psilocybin is also most commonly known as mushrooms. I had a very different experience than what I would assume the majority of people had. Prior to doing psilocybin, I have never ever done any kind of drug, including alcohol or even smoking a cigarette. Psilocybin was pretty much my first introduction to anything. Basically what I had was crushed mushrooms, and I was told to mix it. Like, you can't really mix it because it stayed on top, but I was told to, I guess, put it on top of orange juice, because orange juice prevents some sort of mind cycling thing from happening. Like, it prevents you from having the same thoughts over and over again in your head. Something like that. So I did drink it with orange juice, and then I remember I just resumed cleaning because I had been vacuuming. So I stopped vacuuming because I'm like, oh, this is a great time to try mushrooms. And I mixed it with orange juice and I resumed vacuuming. And about 30 to 45 minutes passed by, and I began noticing that I had an attraction to patterns. I don't know how else to describe that, but like, I just began noticing patterns everywhere. And specifically, it was lines, lines and checkered things. I pushed the vacuum forward and I looked at the ground and I noticed these shadows from like from like a rail. Like, we had a rail guard on our stairs, and the rail guard was casting shadows onto the floor, and I noticed how those patterns of the rail guard like correlated with the patterns on the floor, and how that somehow correlated with the patterns on the ceiling because we had wood beams. And like, my mind was just going crazy, mixing all of these, like putting together all of these patterns. That's how it started. It was like, what is with all these fucking patterns? Oh, they're everywhere. So I sat down on the couch in the living room, and I was really trying to not lose my head. I actually recorded myself for about 45 minutes, and then the recording got disturbed because I had incoming phone calls, so the recording shut off because it was on my iPhone. But anyway, I actually did record myself for about 45 minutes. But in an early onset of it, it's like you can control your mind for 10 seconds, maybe 5. In the beginning, it was longer. You could keep yourself together for like 10 seconds, and then suddenly you would just find yourself across the room. I mean, mentally. This is really difficult for me to describe. Not physically, because physically I was on the couch, right? The best way I can describe it is like imagine yourself as a balloon, and the way I am right now, which is sober, you are a whole balloon, like a regular inflated helium balloon. But when it takes you, like when the psilocybin takes control of your mind, it's like you expand. Like, you are across the room, but you are still in the same place that you are at. Like, you're the same balloon, but you're just everywhere. And you can't like control a logical thought pattern, because you can bring yourself back to like a logical thinking pattern, like who you are naturally. When I say bring yourself back, I just mean like who you are normally, like right now. You can't connect what you were thinking about. But it's just like this disconnect, It's just like yourself is shattering and you're expanding, and you can't keep yourself together to logically function and to like have a thought that is like staying put. You can hear me on the recording saying, I'm still here, because I would pull myself back together, but that only lasted for like 3 to 5 seconds in the beginning, maybe 10 seconds, and then you can literally hear a change in my voice as my like consciousness drifts away. I would start out with saying, I'm still here, like in my normal voice. I'm sorry, this still makes me laugh. I would start out with saying, I'm still here in my normal voice, which means I'm still like logically functioning, I'm still aware of what's happening, blah blah blah. And then my voice would change. my voice my voice would change. And I would be saying the same thing, like I'm still here, except it would be in a really creepy voice. And on the recording you can obviously hear that I'm not still here. But it would be like, oh, I'm still here, I'm still Yvette, and then 3 seconds later, I would be like saying, I'm still here. Next moment, I became like conscious enough to remember it. I was laughing on the couch. My dog had come up to me, one of my dogs, the one that's over there actually. She came up to me and she was, just being friendly, like wagging her tail, because I was using a baby voice. You can hear it in the recording. I was using a baby voice, and I was laughing because she came up to me and her hair, or her fur, really tickled my face. And I kept saying, Ginger's so soft, Ginger's so soft. And I was like rolling my face in like her fur. And I was like, she's so fluffy. Like that, yeah. And I was laughing hysterically in the recording because I don't know why. It just was so funny to me that she was fluffy and soft, I guess. And then the recording cuts off, and what happened was I had a phone call. I remember like coming awake because I was like in a delirious laughing like thing, because the next thing I knew is that I heard the ending tone of my ringtone, and I like sat up and I like stared at my phone, and the first thing I said was uh-oh, and it was one of the other employees. So I was like uh-oh, because I knew that he needed something from me, and I knew that he needed my help. And I was in no state to be talking to people. So I couldn't pick up the phone. Panic set into me. Absolute panic set into me. Because I was like, uh-oh. And then he called about 4 more times. And I was freaking out because I was home alone. He knew my parents. In my, mushroom-induced state of mind, I was worried that after not picking up from him 4 to 5 times, he would call my parents, and that they would start calling me. And if I ignored their phone calls, I was worried that they would send the police to the house to check up on me, because they were out of state, I believe. We were just staring at the phone, just watching him repeatedly call me. Eventually, I turned the phone off. And I don't know how long I turned the phone off, because time perception is really effed up, and then I just started pacing around the entire house. Just pacing. And then any kind of light that I saw, if it was white, red, or blue, I immediately thought it was the cops. So I remember I went into my parents' office, because I was pacing all around the house. I went into their office, and they had this blinking blue light from like some sort of Bluetooth thing, and immediately my body froze because their office was facing a window, and I thought that the blue light was coming from outside the window, that the cops had arrived. Then I saw a red light, I believe on the modem to the internet. I immediately thought it was the cops. And I was standing in that room, in the office, texting him for literally about 20 minutes. The same thing. Like, in various ways. I'm sorry, it's just so freaking funny. Okay, so I was like, please don't tell Dad, please don't tell Dad. And he's like, I'm not telling Dad. And he was just repeating the same shit back. And I was just, it was like a cycle thing. Like, I would be texting him, and I would read what he's saying, and I would comprehend it, but like one part of me thought that he was just lying to me and that he would be calling the cops, and the other part of me just forgot what he just said. Like it was I remembered a little bit of what he just said, but mostly I didn't really care because that was in the past, and maybe he changed his mind in this second. So, I just kept texting him the same thing over and over. But he somehow got me to stop texting him, because I couldn't turn off my phone, okay? Because the phone, when it was turned off, it was giving me more anxiety than when it was turned on, because I kept imagining like the worst situations of like everyone calling me on my phone, and I was just not ignoring everyone, and like I just wanted to know at least who was calling me, you know. I had to go hide because I was still convinced that the cops were coming. But I wanted to be in the living room couch just in case the cops came to knock on the door. I wouldn't answer the door if they came, like in my mind, I was thinking this. But if they did come, I wanted them to maybe glance inside the house before they knocked the door down. And if they could see me, like in my mind, if they could see me being on the living room couch, they would just assume that I was sleeping and that they would leave me alone. Before I went to the living room couch as my final resting point, I went into the kitchen to check the time. And I remember that the person, when they initially called me, it was like 8:35 when they called me, and I was still hyped up on their phone call when I walked into the kitchen. And when I walked into the kitchen, the freaking time was 11:45. And it felt like 20 minutes had gone past. Like, genuinely, honestly, I swear to freaking God, it felt like 20 minutes had gone past. I felt like all I've been doing is pacing, texting my brother, and then switching from my dad's bed to the couch to back to his bed. And then I got up and I looked at the kitchen clock. After I finally laid down and decided that this is the place that I'm going to stay, no more pacing, I had quite a wonderful experience. Even though all I did was lay on the couch with my eyes closed. The most outrageously beautiful symphonies were in my head, in my ears, in the room, existing all around me in the darkness. Just the most beautiful sounds I've ever heard, produced by my own freaking brain. I can't even play a full song on the piano for you. I can't even tell you, I can't even read music notes. I don't have any musical training whatsoever. But just the most gorgeous, just amazing symphonies, just constantly flowing, just like it felt like my life. I became detached from the couch, and it felt like all I have ever known in this world was music. And it was fascinating. It was remarkable. I would want to go back to that state of mind anytime. Because obviously when you're on psilocybin, your brain is overstimulated, right? So when I closed my eyes and when I couldn't experience that overstimulus through my other senses, I think it just goes to the extreme with whatever senses it can. And in my case, it was my auditory senses. I had a rotating globe in my head, and every time it rotated to a new continent, the music would shift, and it would be music that I would expect to be coming out of that area. Each breath felt like it was 1,000 seconds long. I felt like, in the beginning especially, because in the beginning you're still concentrating on these kind of things, in the beginning I felt like I would surely die, because my breathing was so slow. Everything felt so slow. Like, I felt like I would have 1,000 musical notes play through my head in the course of time that it took me just to inhale. And I remember inhaling, and like thousands and thousands of beautiful melody, notes, and thoughts, everything just rushing into my head and playing and like experiencing and everything just beautiful. And then I would exhale. And I remember being so surprised that I had just exhaled. I would think to myself, like, shouldn't I have exhaled like 10 minutes ago? Surely I'm fucking dying. I'm probably not breathing, because I was so incredibly surprised that I had just exhaled. Like that exhale kind of, because you're in this daze, and that exhale kind of like shook me up a little bit. Like, it kind of woke me up. I'm like, because you know you're making a noise when you exhale. I'm like, what on earth? And it happened again the next breath I took. But honestly, those breathing moments, It was the most slowed down perception of time that I've ever experienced. I should already be on my 100th breath. I just had one breath. That span of time was just one breath? How is that possible? How is it possible to have 1,000,001 notes play in your head and the swirl of imagery and colors and just beauty exist inside of you in the span of one breath? The entire reality of life, I didn't really exist anymore, but the entire reality of life was just music. That was basically all I had ever known. I felt like that was just my life, music and the beat and how it dragged you along. And it was no longer a question of whether I was here or not. That question just became non-existent. Um, I didn't think about myself at all. I didn't think about how it was affecting me at all. I didn't think about where my brain was. I just was, but I didn't know what I was because I didn't think about it. It didn't really matter. I just existed, and I just have memories of music. I think it was 4 a.m. and I remember getting up from the couch, and I don't remember what broke the spell, but something broke the music spell. It was probably my dogs pacing because at this point they really needed to go outside. My body was very disoriented. It felt like you would move your foot forward, but the sensation of your foot hitting the floor was extremely delayed. So basically, I would already be across the room, but my senses would still be telling me that I had just taken my first step. So I led my dogs into my room because in my mind, that I just did that just in case the police broke down the door because my dogs ran away. If they saw an open door, they would run out of it. So I'm like, okay, I better get them into my room just in case the police come to break down the door. And if they break down the door, at least I know that my dogs will not run away. That was the first time I tried psilocybin, and the last time, currently. But I mean, I'm not opposed to trying it again. I'm just very cautious about. I'm just very cautious about my brain and not not effing it up, because psychedelics are great if you know how to experience them properly, and if you're in a mental state of mind, and if you've done your research, and if you're in a. I was definitely not in a good mindset to be experiencing psilocybin because I was paranoid about the police, but it turned out to be an overwhelmingly positive experience because of the music.